It's wonderful to be here with you all. My name is Lori Oakes, and I'm a professor here in the Department of Feminist Studies. I also study reproductive justice, and I was a campus abortion rights advocate in the 1980s. So some of the things that you've just seen in the film are things that I remember from my experience. I'm very pleased to be here with Wendy Eley Jackson, who holds a MFA in screenwriting as an award-winning collaborative storytelling trailblazer in the film and television industry. We are so pleased to be able to have her on campus. I thank you all for being here to join us in an inspiring conversation about the Other Roe, so that we can gather together to educate, support, and really move forward. And I see that this film is really calling us to do that. So first of all, I wonder if you would like to introduce your executive producer who is in the audience with us.
I would. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Donya Hames Robinson, the daughter of Margie Pitts Hames. My friend since middle school, and she's my call to action champion who brought this film to me. Donya, would you please stand and say hello to the audience?
Thank you. And I want to congratulate you both on the world premiere that happened in February right here in Santa Barbara, and it had just unquestionably crucial timing just after the 53rd anniversary of Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, which I will say together, Black History Month, and also at a time of continued anti-reproductive justice policies, restrictions on abortion care, contraceptive access, but the film's upbeat tone and the examples of resistance, even in the face of powerful opposition, and the uncovering of lost history really stands out to me the most. But one of the things I was thinking about was, what were some of the hurdles or challenges that you faced when researching, interviewing, and directing The Other Roe during this particularly very polarized political time, talking to people in the South and across the country on these issues that clearly have been very contentious since particularly around the 1960s?
The most challenging thing was the silence. The silence of erasure. When this case is first argued, first in 71, then in 73, the cases, of course, both come down. There are a lot of theories as to why Roe becomes the dominant. But in doing so, they managed to erase a lot of Doe. As a conspiracy theorist, I will own that. In a place like Atlanta, you have to understand, historically speaking, we're less than 10 years from the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So America is feeling a lot of change. For those young women, those that identify as female, here's something that you may not know, which was part of probably of what makes it a challenge. Everyone at the helm are men. They are white men that are controlling the media. And although this makes national headlines, they managed to erase not just footage, newspaper articles, and for those of you that don't know, the Peabody Library is housed at University of Georgia. So that is my alma mater. And it is the silence, it's the people not wanting to speak about this. It is finding footage around Margie and something that's not just her personal, but the professional. So it took a lot of digging. We called on one of our other executive producers who has had phenomenal success in his lifetime, Sam Pollard, to help us do our research. He's actually one of the founders of NYU Tisch and is professor emeritus of NYU. And he's getting a Lifetime Achievement Award for the Emmys this year. So he's done over 84. And so, we employed everybody to just try to find as much as we could. So the excavation became a huge problem. So fortunately for us, I had Donya, and as well as her brother, who's featured here, Adam Hames, and one of the mentees of Margie, Ann Rose. And so for us, it was the silence. the erasure, the lack of footage. We wanted this to be a feature-length film. And it was just hard getting people to talk to us. And so fortunately, one of our executive producers, Ann Rose, owned the Jackson Clinic before Diane Durbitz, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about the political case, this is Dobbs versus Jackson, right? This is Jackson, Mississippi. So for those of you that are not from the American South and has not spent a considerable amount of time in the American South, you have to know there's a way to move, especially when you're a Black female scholar talking about subjects like this at a very contentious time. So that was the hardest for me. Moving in and out of Georgia, I've already marched, I've advocated, and I'm not stopped doing these things, but I am a very proud child of born in Alabama, raised in Georgia, and so understanding how to navigate was my superpower, but not finding everything that I was looking for was the biggest challenge.
I see. Well, I'm wondering if while you were facing those challenges, if you were also thinking about what kinds of primary audiences that you were reaching out to. Did you have certain movements or people or ages of generations that you were trying to reach out to or thinking about while you were carrying out the entire project? And then I wonder if that is the case, if you had specifically different messages for different groups that you wanted to have them come away with.
Well, the approach is multi-generational. I am a mom of girls and boys, and wanting them to know not only their history but their rights. My father-in-law, who was the first African-American mayor of any major southern city, Maynard Jackson, used to say the problem is not the bad guys, it's that the good guys have gone to sleep. So understanding my lack of knowledge, right? I was born in 1970. My first daughter was born in 1995. I teach here. I love and adore all of my students. The approach needed to be very three-pronged to remind those that lived it, that find some way to inspire the younger, educate us, but as well, it wasn't just the history, but understanding the legal ramifications, understanding the differences. Because here's what we saw happen. When Roe falls, you cannot restore Roe without Doe. But if you don't know that Doe exists, it's destined to be continued to nibble at, and that's what Eleanor Schmiel was sharing in the film. We have to, and by the way, RBG predicted that this could happen. So when we have this right again, I hope it happens in my lifetime. My hope is that the old, the middle, if it's okay for me to say that, as well as the young, we not only have a voice, we find our voice, we activate that, and more than talk, you must have a plan. You must have a roadmap, and you have to understand the ground game of how politics works. So.
Absolutely. So I think that there are lots of different types of movements who are trying to work, especially in this particular moment. And one that has stood out to me and many students is the reproductive justice movement. So reproductive justice as a concept, as a movement, it originated in 1994 by a group of Black international women's health movement activists who were really interested in human rights.
Yes.
And they were at a conference in Chicago, came together to discuss this, and Loretta Ross, who's one of the co-founders, she's also a MacArthur Genius Award winner, she visited campus last month, and she was really talking about that moment when they came together, and she was emphasizing self-determination and human rights. And clearly the Other Roe and many of the people who were interviewed are really talking exactly about that, self-determination and human rights. So I'm wondering what you think that the reproductive justice kind of framework offers advocacy for abortion rights and access to care, and what kinds of through lines you see there from Doe v. Bolton, because I think they're clear.
They're very clear, but we have to make sure that we understand one of the persons in this film. Andrea Young, the one that makes the comment that we're still a democracy.
Yeah.
She is the eldest daughter of Ambassador Andrew Young, the last lieutenant of Martin Luther King, who's still with us, a very dear and friend of mine, and she's the executive director of the ACLU. And one of the things that she and I have spoken about continuously is how do we make this a call to action for every single person in America? How do you go about inspiring and creating a spark for people that don't believe the way that you believe? How do you bring people to the table to have poignant conversations rooted in facts, not, what did we learn from the first administration? Alternative facts, not alternative facts, but facts. And understanding what needs to happen for Doe to be the linchpin for Roe so both of them can move forward. So when we think about reproductive justice, that is any girl or any woman that has her, from the time she has her first period, right, to the time that she doesn't. We're talking about more than just reproductive justice, we're talking about health care. And if you don't see how they all kind of mesh together and what that through line is from adolescence to, got some gray hair up here, then you are completely fooling yourself. It is an active conversation that we have to have at all times. We have to make sure that it's more than Planned Parenthood, it's more than Majority Foundation. You've got all of these elements, ACLU, NAACP is fighting on so many different rights. And so there's a way for activism, there's a way for a call to action, but we first have to have a conversation. I was sharing in the green room with Emily, is that a dear friend of mine, she won't want me to say her name, but a dear friend of mine is one of the anchors for MS Now. And for 2 years, Donya and I would listen to the news and would like, they're citing the wrong case. That's not the right case. That's not the right case. So when you hear on the news and they're talking about healthcare providers and what they're sharing is that they could go to jail or those different things, that's not Roe, that is Doe. So first, I believe you have to, my mother-in-law used to say, you catch more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. I will say my approach and the approach of our entire team, and I have to give a shout out to 2 UCSB alums who helped us make this film, Marcello Facina, who is a film and media studies graduate, went to UCLA, got his MFA in animation, as well as Eric Huang. They had never heard of this case, right? So it was wonderful to not only have them on set, but to teach these gentlemen, here are the ways you protect your mom, your sister, your loved ones, and this is how we need to move the needle. So a lot of consultations, a lot of opportunities, but the silence, the erasure, and the reframing that has to be done on a consistent basis, because none of us can keep accuracy of what happens at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, right? So we have to talk to our lawmakers. We have to talk to our constitutional lawyers. And I always am amazed about how many of even my own family and friends didn't read Project 2025, and they have not read Project 2026. If I ask this audience, with a show of hands, how many people in the audience have read Project 2026? Oh, Project 2026. If you thought 25 was fireworks, read 26. And so we're watching in real time art imitating life and vice versa. There's a new show called The Testament, which is a spinoff of The Handmaid's Tale, right? There are elements in that one show of Project 2025 and 2026. All of that to say is, it's nice to be entertained, but entertainment will not keep keep you free. It's one thing to get free. It's another thing to stay free. And one of the reasons why we wanted to do this doc is that we're not doing a good job of staying free because we're asleep.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that you emphasize in the Other Roe are abortion care providers themselves. I was really glad to see that they are interviewed because they don't sleep.
They do not.
They're doing the very, very hard work of trying to keep up with all of the aspects of healthcare and trying to keep themselves safe at the same time they're keeping others safe. And I've always thought that the world of abortion rights and abortion care is really quite small. And I know that there have been other documentaries about some of the key figures. For example, Dr. Warren Hearn is in After Tiller, which is was in 2009, is a documentary, and it is about after Dr. George Tiller was murdered. He was also an abortion provider, was murdered by anti-abortion extremists. So Dr. Hearn is also a professor of anthropology,
Yes.
which I got a PhD in, and so I met him over 3 decades ago when I was a graduate student. We were at a conference in Washington, D.C., and I was presenting a paper. This is part of the small world thing. I was presenting a paper on abortion pro-life discourses. And he was in the audience. I didn't know who he was. He was this very large, imposing person with that voice, the very deep voice. And he took me to task. I was a graduate student, right? First conference paper ever, demanding that I never use the word pro-life because that is not what those people are. They are anti-abortion. So I took that very seriously. And then later on, Professor Carol Joffe, who you also worked with, she worked very closely with abortion care providers, including through the National Abortion Federation that Dr. Hearn co-founded. So again, the small
Right.
world. But her work really led me to use the language of abortion care
Yes.
away from abortion service.
Right.
And in your experience, I wonder, did you find that the way you talked about or thought about abortion and abortion care, or the people who are at the center of that care, did that change at all throughout your experience of doing this documentary?
OMG, I actually know what's going through Donya's head right now.
Oh.
Getting this film made, and this is my 6th doc, was hard. You say the word abortion to many people, they don't want to give to it, they don't want anything to do with it, they're afraid to be targeted. They operate from a place of fear. I too carry that. I'm Black, I'm female in America, directing and writing a documentary and doing research about abortion. Bullseye doesn't get much bigger than that, okay? Our executive producer, Ann Rose, would say, it's not reproductive, it's abortion, abortion. Margie would say the abortion. You've got to say the word abortion, right? And that was alarming for me because there's a part of me that says she's absolutely right, and there's the other part of me that says, I've got to sell this film, right? And it's a very delicate balance to be able to, I would share with other documentarians, and we would talk about it. Say, well, Wendy, it's safer to say reproductive. I would talk to my friends that are, journalists, New York Times, and they're like, you've got to be very careful with those words. Sometimes you have to, it was a bait and switch in some moments to be able to get the access to people or get people on board or to get people to give. So we didn't water down the messaging, but we needed to get the film done first. Then we could take the dialogue back to saying what it really is, abortion care, right? And what that meant. We had the opportunity to, and that was my first time visiting an abortion clinic in Atlanta. That day, there was no one getting an abortion. They were able to do, I think, over 50 abortions that day. Not one girl that was in there was over 15. Most of them had been brought there by their mothers or grandmothers. They have been raped sometimes by their brothers, their fathers, their uncles, their grandparents. And so to tell, you don't, I mean, I've had children, some of you have had children, you don't know that you're pregnant at 6 weeks. It's so early, but Georgia has this heartbeat bill, like Mississippi has a heartbeat bill. So to, the language of getting things done, I always tell people, I became a director later. I was a producer first, then writer, then director. So my mindset of my approach has to be research first, marketing, the business strategy. Let's set up a strategy of how we're going to do this, and then we can get it done. And so I am absolutely thrilled to hear you say the words abortion, right? Because for so long, I have been afraid. Even as a director, even though I know it's the right thing to say, how do I get other people on board who are afraid of that word, right? And so it's code switching. Using a term from the movie The Great Debater, sometimes you do what you have to do so you can do what you want to do.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I think was interesting in the film is about how talking about abortion rights was front and center.
Yes.
And what is quite chilling is that some of the things that we are hearing now are exactly coming back. So there is a talking about how to save the life of a pregnant woman was key. And we see today that that's exactly what, again, advocates are having to argue about. So that's another part of it, is to speak about, if you are talking from a pro-life perspective, whose life are you talking about protecting and who's not?
Absolutely. So more if you think about before you had Roe and Doe, women were dying, and Danya says it quite eloquently. Women were dying. Yeah. Any methods necessary to have some type of bodily autonomy, we're facing that. It's hard to believe that we're facing this again. But I'm also reminded there's a difference between optimism and hope. I am hopeful. I am hopeful with grassroots efforts, education, and a lot of great lawyers that we can restore these rights. I am very hopeful that now that Doe has been exposed, we can make some traction. We couldn't make any traction if we weren't having the conversation. And there are a lot more people more eloquent and scholarly around feminist studies like yourself, that I believe it's your charge to continue to keep us informed in and out of the classroom. Right? But how do we do that? And I will tell you, the lens in California is very different than the lens. If I even, I'm from Atlanta. I'm not Danya and I we're from Atlanta. We sit at the table of civil rights every single day, right? That is all we know. We know the Dr. King story more intimately than you would ever read in a book. We know the story of struggle. My father's 1927, born and raised in Harlem, right? Came south as a Tuskegee Airman and still had, at 85 years old, go into sundown counties and be called a boy by a 17-year-old. That has not changed. So how do I go into a sundown county in the South as a person that believes in abortion care as well as abortion service and change the mind of another woman that says, he says, I have to vote this way? How do you start that dialogue? Stacey Abrams couldn't do it all by herself, but she found herself she gave voice to the voiceless, and thank God, delivered 2 senators that could help create some kind of stability. Right. But if we don't, if the intergenerationally, we're doomed to repeat these same mistakes if we are not educated, and you can't just do it from a level of a Research One institution. You have to talk to the poor women. Margie mentioned the same rights that give you abortion services are the same, or the same people that want to attack that are attacking reproductive health care, right? And if you don't have rights to get birth control, or if you're not educated, I think California has 29 counties? I believe California has 29 counties. Georgia has 159 counties, 3 of which are sundown counties. The greatest population of poor people are not in Atlanta. It's in all of the other counties in Georgia. Those are the people that I'm talking to. This may never see the light of day on a Netflix or an HBO. So what is the ground game to educate people so they can find their courage to get to the ballot box and makes a difference? I say, and I submit to everybody in this room, you must vote at every election. Every election matters. And we must continue to educate, reframe, explain without inciting major arguments and fight, because when you're fighting, you can't listen to what the other person is saying. That is the hope that Danya and I both share for this film, that it will spark the conversations that people, including myself, were afraid to have.
Absolutely. I can certainly see it being successful in doing so. And I wonder, one discussion point, I think, would be about how medicine itself has changed and healthcare itself has changed. So I was thinking about, I wonder how the framers of Doe and those who argue Doe, what would they make of self-managed abortion care now? Telehealth, the ability to get medication, abortion through the mail. There are types of access to healthcare now that just weren't even imaginable back at the time of Doe. So I'm wondering if you think that they would celebrate these types of access issues.
Absolutely. What they would be doing is finding a way to codify laws to keep them, to restore them and then codify them so they won't be nibbled away. But we've made huge advances, but not enough. Again, we're not staying free, right? Politics isn't perfect, but it's the best nonviolent means to change the way that we live. And it has to happen at that level. The restriction to health care, the next is the restriction to birth control, right? They say there need to be more babies born. There needs to be less access. And I think it was Clarence Thomas that seeded the idea that birth control, the attack on birth control, should be next. Now, unfortunately, he and I have we're both from Georgia. We don't see things the same, obviously. But I feel hopeful that there's someone in this room who will have a conscience, their conscience will be pricked, and they will go to law school and they will study every word in the Constitution and protect it. And protect it for all people, right? Because we are living in a system where our guardrails are coming down. And I listened to Ambassador Andrew Young say on his birthday a couple of weeks ago, I had sent him a message, I was like, what is it like to watch your work be dismantled in real time? He says, oh, I'm hopeful. Because if the pendulum swings far to the left, it'll swing far to the right again. But this time, we just have to keep everybody brave enough and courageous enough to understand that it won't come. Some people will go to jail, but then you have to have a system to bail those people out. So.
Good to plan ahead to the
Plan
extent
ahead.
that is possible.
It is.
I absolutely agree. I'm thinking about that piece that you were talking about that we started with about silence.
Oh, yes.
And about how difficult it was for you to get some of this information, to even speak about what you were interested in doing. And I've been thinking about what sort of information you might have found, archives that were people's diaries or, I don't know, old films that they had. I wondered where you got some of the footage, of. So did you find that actually, although the historical record is being erased in some ways, and Doe's historical record has been erased, are you finding, was there any evidence that there are small or home-based ways of making history, collecting history, that might be important to be passed down?
I think so. We were not successful in finding any home video. What we were very successful is understanding, when you look back, who was running ABC, NBC, CBS, the onset of CNN, the onset of Fox News. What we found is that they were primarily, they bought early. And they went into, I don't think it would have been possible for me to galvanize and get as much footage that we did get. And I called on Georgia State University, University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, Spelman, Morehouse, Atlanta University, Clark, those that had the lived experiences. And it's amazing, that footage was incinerated. Margie was on she was on the news daily for years. But CNN, you don't have anything. ABC, you don't have anything. CBS, you don't have anything. NBC, you don't have anything. Nothing. We took a whole year asking them to comb through the catacombs, and it had been erased. So the media is under attack. We see our journalists are under attack. What they're betting on is that people will give up and say it's just too encumbersome. So you have to find your John the Baptist in the woods somewhere saying, I'm willing to stand. If you're willing to stand forever, you won't be standing for long. And the footage that we did find, it came through mostly Georgia State University, someone that had been there, Dr. Jonathan Gales, who was the African American Studies Department Chair at Georgia State University. He says, Wendy, I believe there is one piece that Margie did that we managed to keep on VHS tape. Because everything else, the 8mm, it's all gone.
Well, that you found it at Georgia State certainly underscores the role of higher education in preserving historical memory.
Absolutely. And understand that the Walter Brown, that Peabody Library is massive. They do an exceptional job of archiving. ABC's records for the entire Southeast of the United States are housed right there at University of Georgia. They had pictures, but no footage. I was like, this woman was on TV all the time. I would ask Danya, I was like, are you sure? I'd ask other healthcare providers, other abortion rights activists. It's like, no, I was there. Margie, she's got on this white long mink coat. She was fabulous, by the way. Fabulous, fabulous. She, as you could hear her southern drawl, she could just talk her way out of a brown paper bag. So she had charisma. She wasn't inciting anger. Men weren't mad with her. She's the one person that could get in the room, have a seat at the table, and have debate with. And they would say, okay, Margie, let's give her what she's want. She was a brilliant, brilliant attorney. But when she passed too early, she passed away of a heart attack over 20 years ago. So, our question is, who are we silencing now that we don't know about? Right? Who are our archivists? What are they doing? How do we back up information? Where is it being housed? Right? A lot of Margie's papers, I believe, are they at Emory, Danya? They're at Emory University. So Emory is a great place, but they too didn't have anything as well. So it's been difficult. We wanted this as a feature film, and we still could do it, but it would take a lot more archival producers to be able to go through the catacombs of Research One universities around this country and find it. Yeah. But the approach of doing this from California is not the same lens as approaching this when we went back to Georgia and we went to Washington, D.C. to get a lot of things done. And Warren Hearn, we just happened to be there for the abortion convention. Could you believe that? And it's done in secret. It is not broadcast. It is heavily guarded by those that believe in let's just say, they're protected by the NRA and don't even know it. Because they have to be. They're targets.
Yeah. And you happen to be there. That's wonderful. Well, I have one last question for you, and that is, what is the future of the Other Roe, and where will audiences be able to see it in the months ahead? Will you be teaching about it still, or are you on to next future projects?
I'm always on to future projects.
Okay.
I like to eat. No, I will never stop teaching it, right? I shared it with my children. I asked my son on the way here, I said, he's visiting me from Brazil, and I said, did you watch my film? He's like, no. It's like, are you still a voter? Yes, Mom, I'm a voter. Right, well, I need you voting. But we are on the film festival circuit. Our next festival is the San Luis Obispo Film Festival. Of course, we debuted here. We got in the Austin International Film Festival. So we plan on doing the film festival circuit for a minute. We do have opportunities for distribution. Talking to some airlines as well. It's the one time that people have your undivided attention. You're sitting in that, where are you going to go? You have, it is, I learned from doing my first doc for Netflix. Before I gave it to Netflix, I gave it to Delta Airlines because I knew that 80,000 people fly Delta every single day, and that I could catch some attention. And what that has shown me is if I can do that again. So when I run the numbers of theatrical versus just airline, I beat them 13-1. So when I say you have to be creative of how you get the message out and what's your ground game, let your ground game be in the air now that we've got the whole TSA. Don't stop flying, guys. Just get to the airport early. But there are some opportunities that we're looking at for distribution, and our executive producer, Ann Rose, is doing an amazing job doing private screenings. We are now reaching out to law schools from across the country and talking to persons in both feminist studies, and we were having a conference call today, and I said, listen, you gotta call the department chair first, let them figure out who you should be talking to have more discussions like this. I might not be able to attend them, but I promise you, there's not a person that we interviewed. Definitely our, Danya is our captain in many ways. This is very close and near and dear to her heart, so I hope some Speakers Bureau picks her up because her knowledge is deep. She has lived this, and I will say if she does, I'm sure she doesn't mind. Her and her brother, her family was the sacrifice for us to have our rights, right? When you have a mother that's arguing before the Supreme Court and moving the needle like that, the sacrifice was family. Yeah. So our hope is that it gets out there, but we've got a ways to go before we'll release it to the general public. But yes, if there's anyone here that wants to do private screenings in their homes and bring together on other panel for discussions, we welcome it. And we'll license it as well.
Great, good, thank you.
Is that the Constance Penley?
It sure is.
Good to see
And
you.
thank you to my wonderful colleague, Wendy, for presenting us with this film, having us here tonight to be able to talk about it. I have a question about, I mean, this film makes you hungry for more. You really want to know more about everyone in the film. One of the questions that I had, you were very clear about the perspective on civil rights
Yes.
that everyone has, everybody you work with, everybody possibly in the film. I was wondering about other kinds of organizing. I too am from the South, and I was wondering about other kinds of organizing. Like, for example, was there any involvement in union organizing at all? Because labor, of course, I mean, that was a really wonderful statement made about, oh, they just want poor women to have more babies to make more poor women who can work for cheap.
Right.
So that was a labor issue.
Yes.
So I was just wondering if there were other aspects of the labor issues that rose up here.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I do believe, under the guidance of Ann Rose, our executive producer, she has brought up unions. There's some both profit and nonprofit sector that we are talking to about screening the films, making people aware of them. But one of the things I think I'm finding out is that a lot of people don't know how to do grassroots. And so you have to teach groups of people how to do that. And let me say that it's really important for us to be able to pass the torch to this next generation, right? Not leave them in a place of guessing, but we are in talks with other, not just organizations, but unionizing to be able to get the word out. Ms. Foundation is willing to, of course, help us do this as well, and I'm glad that we have people like Kathy Spiller who will be here, even our first partner, Ms. Newsom. She is an advocate for this film as well and is on. So what we've done is we're creating a strategy team around how to do educational screenings, educational talks, as well as organizing. That is a huge piece of it. But where it stops, where it has to start is, what is the strategy? And for me, I will tell you, what I've learned about strategy, I learned from the feet of the people that did it, right? So Ambassador Young, when I say, well, how did you get the civil rights done? I said, it couldn't be the NAACP by itself with SCLC. We all had to come together, white, black, brown, and make sure that everyone had a voice, a contribution to that. But I think to your point, that's something, and I'm glad you brought that up again, because I think I had not necessarily had suppressed it, but I'm trying to, in other ways, get this film out. So that's something that I think we should take quite seriously and critically find a way to do that in this nation. Thank you for that.
Hi, my name is America. I wanted to point out, like, one of the clips, it was when Roe v. Wade was, like, overturned, or, like, they had the court. And there was a lot of, like, young women cheering, and it kind of incited a sense of, like, if they understand, like, what's going on. So I'd ask you, like, do you think that they fully understand, or do you think, like, a lot of the young generation doesn't really understand and should, I guess, if you had advice for us and, like, researching and getting to understand more about, like, what's going on in today's, like, movements and politics?
Thank you for that question, because it is quite poignant. I'm glad that you are the spark for which we did this film, right? So the first thing I would tell you is that it's important to not just know your rights, and don't believe everything that current day media tells you, because it's all written in subtext. It is important for you to do your own research. It's important for you to understand legalese and the language of the law. It's important that when you go to vote, you know what you're voting for. So getting a copy of what's on the ballot first, and being able to have small discussions. You take those small discussions, make them medium discussions, and then you find ways to effectuate change in your community first. So first thing you need to know is that all politics is local first, right? So we are always looking at what happens in Washington first, but local, do you even know who your mayor is? Do you know how they vote, right? So spend time with your local leaders. There's Monique Limon that's here, Salud Carbajal. Find ways to get involved in what's going on in your community, both politically, as well as if you see messaging that you want to get behind because it means a lot to you. It takes a lot of courage, right? Leaders are made, but you have to have a lot of courage to kind of stick in there. You have to be willing to be a party of one until you grow your party of thousands. But no matter what, you want your messaging and everyone in your community, you have to have a unified voice, unified messaging. And then, I would say to anybody, let's just say if you didn't necessarily want to go into politics, it's important that you know I've only lived here 7 years, but I know every single zip code in Santa Barbara County. It's important for you to know how many people are voting in that county and being able to take that data back to leaders and say, in this particular, let me give you Montecito, 93108, we have this many registered voters, this many people will be eligible to vote in 6 months, and here are the things that are concerning. Now, I've got these pockets of people willing to vote against you unless you're doing something. You represent me, right? And so you have to be able to speak truth to power, right? And don't be afraid of that. Every single elected official, they work for you. It is not the other way around. If you find yourself getting overwhelmed, like I do, by watching the news every day, take a beat. And then when you're taking beat, do the research. And in doing the research, you find other people that have come before you that faced far worse. There was a time where people like me couldn't have ever been on this stage and sat across from someone like her. I'm very aware that has only happened in my parents' lifetime. My father used to joke with my mother because she was born in Dothan, Alabama, and he was born in New York, that she was born in 1941, that she couldn't vote until 1965, but he had been voting since he was 19 years old. So you want to create community, but you also want to rally community, but you must do it with empathy. Everyone doesn't have the same access to the knowledge that you've been bestowed by being here at UCSB. So you treat people with love. You find the things that you're more alike than you are different. And I have to say it, don't let anybody gaslight you into thinking that your reality isn't your reality.
If I could, yes, exactly. If I could follow up on that a bit, just to say that clip also spoke to me, and to connect to your idea of understanding where people are coming from is a start to empathy. So I have done some research on pro-life feminism, and that is what it's called, pro-life feminism, and how young people, there's some chapters on some college campuses, so young people, like those young women who were celebrating and very joyful, they have a point of view that says that abortion hurts women and that it exploits women, and because abortion hurts women, the solution is to not have abortion legal. So that is the kind of logic that they live with, and that they're trying to promote, that would then have them celebrate in the case of the fall of abortion rights as a nationwide. So you can see, again, one of the reasons why it's important to go to the polls, because they're voting in a different way than those who really want to support access to equitable health care for abortion care.
Well, the terrific film, I really enjoyed it a lot. And the star, the charismatic star, Marjorie Pitts Hames, was just terrific. So I want to know more about her. How did you become political? I mean, what was she active in the civil rights movement? Or I think what Connie was saying, was she active, or her parents active in the labor movement? And what were the kind of, and when did she become a feminist? Was it sort of the late 60s, you know, that moment, or was she always a feminist? So I just want to know more about her background and how she came to this, you know. That's what, yeah, and she's a terrific, charismatic figure. She reminded me of Virginia Durr, you know, who was another figure of that sort. She's younger, but anyway. Yeah.
Margie had always been a feminist. If you don't mind, hand that mic to the very last person on that row, Margie's daughter. Dawn, you take this one.
Yeah, thanks. Mom was literally raised in a dirt poor, meaning in a little cabin that didn't have a floor. And so she was very poor in Tennessee, in the hills of Tennessee, and she worked beside all of her neighbors when it was harvest time on the farms to bring in the crops or do what needed to be done. White, black, didn't matter, everybody had to help. And so for her, that's where she got started with equality. And she never really understood why people were feeling one way or the other, that people weren't equal if they could all, you know, do the same work, men and women. So she didn't really understand this, that there were hierarchies in America, and she didn't really think that that was a good idea. She didn't think it was good for women. She became a feminist when she wanted to have sex, and she was young, and the only way to have sex was to get married. And so it was a very different time back in the 50s, in the 60s in Tennessee. But she did very much fight her way through law school. She went to undergrad and law school in 5 years, knocked it out of the park, and started working in a labor law firm to help them really understand how civil rights could be actually brought to light, meaning that if any workers had to wear white gloves, they all had to wear white gloves. So she was very passionate from the beginning, but being a woman, she really wanted, of course, very much to help women find their own equality, which she never again understood. Why was there inequality about this? And I'm sure that a lot of the young folks here have kind of no idea of what it was like back then. They shouldn't have to have that idea. But now that we're going back in that direction, it's important to know it was not good. It was not good. Women were very, very, very subjugated back in the days. And the freedoms we all take for granted now are truly being challenged. And so those of us who are a little bit older are trying to say, okay, we're going to do our best, but you guys pick up the slack too, because these are your rights as well. So I don't mean to get on a soapbox, but that's where she got it from. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would just like to thank everybody who's been here to share in seeing this really inspirational film. I would really like to thank you and Danya as well. This is such a great platform to continue these really important discussions, not only to recover history, but then to also figure out what our next steps are going to be. So I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for coming. Don't forget to vote. Don't forget to vote. Don't forget to vote. Don't forget to vote.
That could be your next film.
Don't forget to vote.
Vote.
Right.